Pleased to be here to have this opportunity to share our progress with you and to hear your thoughts on what we have accomplished so far. I wonder if there we go. Great. So just as an overview for what I will speak to this evening, we'll just build on the comments that Bob and Ron have already made in terms of the purpose and need for this new campus plan, which we refer to as the 2026 campus plan. I'll introduce you to the members of our team covering the disciplines that Ron outlined and talk about the area in which our planning study, or the area which our planning study covers, explain the timeline that we're following, and also share with you some of the consultations we've had the opportunity to do to date. I'll highlight some of the key projects which have emerged from the university's strategic planning process. I'll talk a little bit about how that relates to our campus plan as well. Describe what we're calling preliminary considerations. It's a little bit of an awkward term, but really it's intended to give you some of the bigger directions which are guiding our thinking at this midstream stage, as Bob had explained, and then I'll just finish by explaining where we go from here. So the campus plan is really intended to guide the physical evolution of the campus, in particular in the next 10 years, but within the 30-year context that Bob outlined. It's important to realize that it is only one of a series of highly connected planning exercises that Princeton University has underway. So that I've mentioned already the strategic plan. Through our work and in collaboration with the Office of Sustainability at Princeton, we are also actively involved in the creation of the next Princeton University Sustainability Plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And also a direct part of our work is a very detailed, what's being called the Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan, which infrastructure planning is always part of a campus plan, but never to our experience to the level of detail at which we're pursuing it here. And again, I think you'll understand some of the great importance and opportunity provided by that, particularly as it connects to the university's ambitious sustainability aspirations. Just the last point on this slide is we often, while the official name of the study and the outcome is a campus plan, it really in many ways is better thought of as a framework for decision making over time. And that's particularly relevant for the 30-year time period, because I think, as Bob said, and as we all know, it's difficult to even imagine at this time of rapid change what will happen in 5 years, let alone 10 and certainly 30. But for various reasons, which I hope will become a little more clear this evening, it is important that we think about, and to our best ability as a team, understand what possible scenarios for that 30 years might be. So the reason that the plan is being undertaken now is probably somewhat evident from its title. The existing campus plan is the 2016 campus plan, and it is, of course, the year 2016. So I'm happy to report that we've been working for already 2 years, so this was not left until the very last minute of the plan. As those of you who follow the university's progress probably know that most of the significant recommendations of the 2016 plan have now been realized, and so certainly for many reasons it is time to reconsider. Some of the other elements of the 2016 plan that were not realized probably for the purpose of this exercise need to be rethought in terms of changing landscapes. So again, planners don't always get everything right in terms of the foresight in a 10-year plan. So that's essentially the kind of context for which we're working within. One of the other important differences between this planning exercise and that undertaken for the 2016 plan is the geography of the study area, and I hope you can see that. The green outline is the area that the 2016 plan covers, and all of the lands are located in Princeton as compared to West Windsor, which we'll talk about in a moment. Generally bounded on I always get my directions wrong. Sometimes I blame it from being from Canada. We just keep things simple, where in Toronto the lake is on the south, but I know that your geography is not quite that straightforward. So let's just pretend that Princeton is north of Lake Carnegie, if you'll bear with me for the evening. So I think that on the west, if that was the case, then Alexander was the boundary of the 2016 campus plan. The Butler Tract is the far eastern limit of the 2016 campus plan, and then a bit of a moving boundary along the rest of the lands, and of course Lake Carnegie being the southern boundary. So I think what's immediately evident and consistent with this much longer time period that this planning exercise is considering is that we are also looking at a much larger geography. So looking at the university's lands not only in the municipality of Princeton, but also in the municipality of West Windsor, for the lands south of Lake Carnegie, as well as lands at Forestall and not Forestall Village, but for the Forestall campus in the municipality of Plainsboro. The Merrick-Stanworth lands also in Princeton are indicated here not because significant or probably any change is imagined, certainly in the 10 years, but just because, again, as Ron outlined, everything is connected in this kind of a planning exercise. And so the activity and the people who live as part of the university community at Merrick-Stanworth are part of our bigger thinking about movement and some of the other objectives that are being set. One of the other elements that you probably notice on the plan is that we've highlighted the Carnegie Center, 701 Carnegie, which is where the university has a significant presence through two of its major administrative units. So that, of course, also is in our planning thinking. And then there are some also, in addition to those lands, others shown here, most notably probably being the eating clubs on Prospect Avenue that are not under the university's ownership, but clearly part of university life. Sure.
It's a quick question.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask, is that all of the land that the university owns that was outlined, or is there additional land that the university owns that's not shown?
There is some additional land. I'll let Bob answer that.
As I said earlier, the Forestall Center properties are not part of this review. Other than that, no.
Great, thank you. So as was also indicated, we have a very comprehensive team. I won't go through the details of all of the members, but I did want to share with you just a little bit of their background and how it relates to the work that we're doing. Urban Strategies is the lead consultant. We're responsible for campus planning, campus design, and components of the community engagement, and tonight is one significant element in that program. We also have expertise in transportation through two firms, and actually it just bears pausing on that for a moment to say that, like in the case of transportation, many of our team members were on the team that completed the 2016 campus plan, so BFJ Transportation Planning is an example of that. We also have VHB, Van Ness, Hangam, Bruslin, who are also transportation planners and engineers working with us, balancing out some of the other considerations, in particular relating to cycling and pedestrian amenity as part of the campus framework, which again I'll talk about more later. Sustainability, as you've heard already, and we'll hear more, is a very important foundation of our work. We have two consultants who are specialized in aspects of sustainability, although I will say that all of our team members, including Warren's and my firm, are very committed to all thinking about sustainability holistically and as a foundational element in all of our planning thinking. But the two firms dedicated to sustainability are Level Infrastructure, who are looking at all of the campus-wide considerations for sustainable endeavors, and TransSolar, which have completed a very interesting and focused study about building energy reduction, so reducing demand for energy as compared to considering how to conserve carbon in terms of the production of energy. So again, a very holistic perspective on that. We have heritage planners through Mills and Schnoring, who actually have their offices at the Forestall campus. Michael von Valkenburg's firm is responsible for landscape architecture. They have a long relationship with the university, and we're on the last campus planning team. Another Canadian firm, KPMB Architects, who are working here on campus today at the 20 Washington project, are a team that we work with on many other projects, both in Toronto and elsewhere, are responsible for thinking about architecture broadly across the campus, not so much in the design of buildings as the potential capacity of lands to house future development, and working very hand in hand with our design team at Urban Strategies. What else have I not covered? Engineering, all forms of engineering, all the various different elements of civil infrastructure that support a campus's operation. And most probably importantly, in terms of the connection back to sustainability, is niche engineering, who again have worked on campus for a long time and are responsible for such initiatives, or at least working with the university on such initiatives as the restoration of the Washington Street corridor, stream corridor. looking at the ways that better management of water can provide a higher quality of water that leads to increased health, ultimately, of the Lake Carnegie ecosystem. And a number of other specializations on the team as well.
Cindy, I want to go back to Jenny's question for a minute. There are some buildings like the President's House, Lowry House, Palmer House. Well, it depends where you think the line is drawn around Nassau Street, right? So the Garden Theater. So if you draw the line at Nassau Street, there are a few properties, 22 chambers, that we own that are not narrow, precisely within that boundary. Yeah.
Great. So in terms of our study process, we're just about midway through phase 3, a little two-thirds of the way, I guess, maybe through phase 3. We had a very long discovery process, I would describe it. Phase 1 was a year long. Phase 2, which was reconnaissance and data gathering. Phase 2 analysis was about 9 to 10 months long. Princeton University is a complex place. You've seen from the very broad range of our team, which is consistent with the broad range of our mandate, that there were a lot of things that we needed to make sure we fully understood. So it was a very deep and thorough reconnaissance and analysis period. We're now in the process of testing a variety of scenarios, thinking through some possibilities, working actively with our steering committee, which is led by the president of the university and other members of the senior administration, to make sure that there is good and ongoing correspondence between the strategic planning efforts and the campus planning efforts. So all of those conversations are happening now. The target is to be complete about next summer, so the summer of 2017, so that will comprise in totality about a 3-year planning process. At the beginning of the process, we had the opportunity to meet with a whole variety of constituent groups, both on campus and off, of course, beginning with students, both undergraduate and graduate, members of faculty, staff, Princeton's alumni, municipal officials here in Princeton. We had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Lempert, members of the planning board, as well as Mr. Solo, who we're going to hear from in a little bit. Similarly, at West Windsor and Plainsboro, municipal elected and administrative officials, Mercer County as well, and a variety of state departments who have active interest in the advancement of the university, including the DEP, the DOT, the New Jersey Transit, as well as the DNR Canal Commission, among others that I'm sure I've forgotten. One of our other important engagement opportunities, which I encourage you to visit, because today's presentation will actually be posted. We're aiming for tomorrow morning, and I understand that there's a video recording of today's presentation, so if it's possible, we'll also link to that. So that will be on the blog. My final slide will have this address on. If you'd like to jot it down, we'll come back to it, but it's very easy if you just Google. My kids think Google is a verb. I don't know if it officially is yet, but if you Google Princeton Campus Blog, you'll easily come to it. The other things that are on the blog are some important background information to our planning exercise, more than I've had an opportunity to share today. And something that you might also find interesting if you haven't yet been exposed to it or heard that we were undertaking it, but last spring, actually I guess a year ago last spring, in 2015, we had an online mapping exercise called Campus Compass, so there's some excerpts of it here on the screen, which was a very interesting opportunity for us to have a conversation with all members of the community. I think we had approximately 50 members of the Princeton municipal community who also participated in the Campus Compass, as a way to tell us what aspects of campus were highly valued, what aspects of campus were problematic, could be significantly enhanced, to provide us with some detailed insight into how people used the campus at different times of day, how they moved around, and again, what worked well and what some of the challenges were. So there is also a report on the blog site of the Campus Compass outcomes, and I think you might find it to be quite interesting. We certainly learned a lot from it. As Ron mentioned, we have 5 working principles. When you see the final version of these, you may find that they have evolved slightly. They have been endorsed by the steering committee in draft form, but as with all planning exercises, it's a little bit of a testing to make sure that by the end of this planning process, we still feel collectively that these principles exactly encapsulate what the steering committee is hoping to accomplish, but I think they're pretty close to being final. The first really deals with the very integrated environment that Princeton provides for its community, in particular because almost all undergraduates live on campus for the duration of their study, which is quite unusual, but really makes the campus a community within the broader communities, even more so than might be the case on other campuses. The second principle really speaks to the fact that Princeton University is regarded as one of the most beautiful campuses in North America, if not the world. Obviously, this puts a great onus and reminder to our team that all of the work that we do to provide the opportunities for Princeton to continue to evolve physically needs to respect, enhance, and continue in not necessarily replicating, but in ways that are consistent with the quality of place which exists here today and in the past. The third principle speaks to a very important set of efforts at the university to foster diversity in the population that it serves and to make sure that the campus as a setting is a welcoming one to people from a whole variety of backgrounds. It also speaks to the nature of education and discovery today, which is very interdisciplinary, so much more opportunity for people to cross-pollinate ideas, provide places to intentionally meet up with others, but also to accidentally run into people. As we all know, some of the biggest discoveries in our time have come through these kind of accidental opportunities, and so the university is very interested in providing the kind of social infrastructure that allows for those kinds of exciting discoveries to come forward. As you've already heard, sustainability is fundamentally important to this work. The university's intention is to continue to demonstrate best practices in all realms of sustainability, but also to do things on the campus which are beneficial to and understand the connections to the broader regional context. The environment is a set of complex systems, all of which interact, and it is the university's intention through its next sustainability plan to try as much as possible to recognize that and to contribute to it. The final speaks to, I think, as our opening comments, I forget, I wrote it down because I thought it was a very important reminder, but that the university and the town share a unique relationship. This plan is very much about fostering the kind of mutually reinforcing relationship between the university and the neighboring communities, many of which you are here representing, as well as the regional systems and the regional context within which the university and the municipality are located. So the next few slides are some of the highlights from the strategic planning framework, the academic planning exercise, which is running parallel to and in front of the campus plan. So as Bob mentioned, one of the key priorities is to provide new facilities for the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, really to accommodate the growth both in its programs that it's offering to be able to contribute to the emerging disciplines that engineering is so active in, as well as a corresponding increase in enrollment, which is expected. To provide the same kinds of in settings as I was describing previously that allow for synergies across other disciplines and departments, to provide, frankly, space which is functional for research and teaching. You know, the primary academic buildings for the EQuad are very old and outdated in terms of modern science and really create a challenge for the activities that are trying to be accomplished within them. So the key exercise here will be to look for ways to either rehabilitate the existing buildings or provide new ones or some combination of the two. Related to that is an intention to provide strategic new facilities for environmental studies and potentially co-located with some of the new facilities for the School of Engineering, because there are a lot of academic collaborations between those two entities, but in particular to provide better facilities for the Princeton Environmental Institute and the departments of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology and Geosciences. Innovation is a very important thing in discovery discussions all over the place, but in particular here at Princeton University. The intention articulated through the strategic plan is to continue to foster the idea of an innovation ecosystem with a whole spectrum of facilities, some of which have very strong academic affiliations, things like maker spaces, places for people to build things, prototype ideas, test concepts, through to incubator spaces like the one that exists at 34 Chambers Street. to others that may have more relationship with partners, both in the public sector and the private sector. So things that are researched and discovered at Princeton having the ability to be potentially transferred out into those realms through accelerator spaces or partnership spaces. These would be new things to Princeton and expanded to Princeton University, an expansion of that ecosystem. I think Bob mentioned at the outset that the university is intending to grow its undergraduate population in the first 10 years by about 10%, which translates to one residential college. So again, because Princeton, as you all know, houses most of its undergraduates, and expansion in the student body has a direct relationship to the need to provide a place for those students to live. So that will be one of the things that our work will be very focused on. There's also expected to be some increase in the level of graduate student and postdoctorate housing provided through the campus planning effort.
And Cindy, I just want to interject that the strategic planning framework that Cindy is citing here is a public document. It was released last February. It's available on our website. So if you'd like to know more about any of these recommendations, that information is available.
Yes, thank you very much, Bob. So you've heard me talk a little bit already about the sustainability planning framework, which our office is also actively involved in. Really, it begins with the center of this graphic, which is Princeton's continuing commitment to provide a kind of culture or ethos of sustainability in everything that the campus does and everything it represents in terms of what it builds, but also how it operates. The current sustainability plan is organized into three major categories of thinking: research, education, and leadership being one, resource conservation being another, and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions being a third. This drawing is really intended to show you, I think there are 15 distinct elements that are indicated here. As I said at the beginning, the environment is a very complicated and interacting set of systems, and so putting these in their separate kind of bundles is not intended to suggest that they live in those bundles, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But the reason that some of the elements are colored green is because they have a very direct relationship to campus planning, and there's something that it's one of the many reasons that we have the extensive team that we have, that both Ron and I described, so that we have expertise in all of these disciplines. We're working actively with the Sustainability Office at the university. The Director of Sustainability is a key member of our extended team, and her group is responsible for the elements shown in white, which are obviously less directly related to campus planning, but are being thought of in the same framework. And so really, for each of these disciplines listed here individually, the effort is to articulate an aspiration, a kind of stretch target, if you will, that the university would like to progress towards over the planning period, and to do so in a way that can be measured. So there are indicators being conceived of, and the team broadly through all of the disciplines is looking actively at how to achieve those targets and contribute to positive measurements in the indicators through a series of design technologies, design initiatives as well as technologies. So one of the members of the team that I think I skipped over, Burns and McDonnell, is actively looking at new generation opportunities for the production of heating and energy on campus. How can the university be even better in terms of carbon reduction than it is today? So all of those things are an example of the kinds of metrics that we're looking at. And in particular, we're looking for the crossovers and the kind of mutual connections between some of these elements. So just to give you a couple of examples of what I'm saying in the abstract. Land use we think of in a lot of ways, but from a sustainability perspective, one of the key metrics, if you will, is compact footprint. I'm sure you've heard people talk about that. Keeping a campus as compact as possible is beneficial for a whole variety of reasons. And one simple reason that less expansion means less need to cover land, so less need to take land from an permeable surface into an impermeable surface. Keeping a campus compact also means that there are better choices for moving around it. It becomes easier to walk and cycle around it. So it's one of the simple examples of the kind of relationships that we're looking for, and there are many, many more. The next slides are what we call preliminary considerations. As I mentioned at the outset, really these are the bigger ideas that are so far shaping our work. And I realize it can be a little difficult to orient, so I'm going to see if I have, yes I do. So the land you're looking at here is somewhat consistent with the land that the 2016 campus plan boundaries looked at, with the exception that it does not have the extension out to capture the Butler Tract and the lands in between in Broadmead. But it's really what most people think about as the central campus of Princeton today. In fact, actually many people think the central campus of Princeton is north of the Pope Hardy Fields and the stadium, and the Caldwell Fields on the other side. But the key question for our team here is, what is the capacity of this land base? I mean, obviously, the academic interactions that happen here in a university setting are really, if you were to think about it as land value, it's the highest and best use. It's the thing that needs as much proximity as possible. This is a finite resource, however. There is only so much land in the central campus, so good choices need to be made about what uses have highest preference for this finite resource of land. So that's something very much on the team's consideration. It's one of the reasons why we're looking at the larger land base, including West Windsor specifically, because there is a thinking in terms of some period of time in the future where there are other uses that may have a little more distance permissiveness. They may be able to be moved a little further away. So we're looking at that. It also means that there is a very careful consideration of making best possible use of the facilities that are already on the central campus. One of the members of our team that I skipped over is Rick's Associates, who are space planning experts and really adept at searching for the ways to improve space and provide different policies for the use of space, so that classrooms, as an example, can be fully utilized and other uses can be repurposed if they've really extended the period in which they contribute to the academic uses that they're intended to be serving. It also means, though, that some sites need to be reserved for the long term. Like, not all sites within this territory can be filled in the short term, because that would box academic units in. There would be no opportunity to expand key activities, which is really important to be able to think about in a long-term planning framework. One of the key things, as I mentioned, some people think about campus is really just north of some of the key, or at least the larger athletic installations at the south end of the campus. But what it means is that all aspects of this campus need to be thought about as better connected, and we're looking for ways to think about the way that you move north and south, both on the east and west sides of Washington, and also across Washington, so really unifying campus north to south and east to west. The reason that there were those little cutouts at the bottom of the last slide is that there are a significant amount of the land area north of the lake which are protected, so these 4 woodland fingers, as we describe them, which are the feeder creeks and water systems that lead to Lake Carnegie. And really, this is just one of the bigger moves, I think, and I'm sure many of you feel the same, that Lake Carnegie is a wonderful resource, both ecologically but also from the perspective of the image and experience of campus. But you really only feel that fairly briefly when you cross Washington Road as you come into campus. If you row, then obviously you have more direct experience, and I'm sure that there are many other activities and reasons to use the lake, but it isn't an active part of the everyday experience of the campus. And I think that today it's very much on the edge of campus. In the very long term, it can actually be thought of as the center of campus, as something that may join the two sides of the lake, the lands in West Windsor to the lands in Princeton. And so recognizing that this is an ecologically protected area, that there are serious and appropriate restrictions on what can happen in the lands shown as green, at the same time there are opportunities to provide at least moments when you could get closer to the lake, possibilities of connecting across the lake, which I'll show in a few slides, and also thinking about ways that, like on the Washington Stream Corridor that I mentioned at the beginning, which has been significantly rehabilitated with a great amount of resulting positive quality to the water that is moving to Lake Carnegie, there may be similar opportunities in the Broadmead area and possibly in the long term on the Springdale Stream. The next major consideration is locations for other forms of housing than the student housing that I talked about coming out as a priority from the strategic plan. So this would be for faculty, for staff, for postdoctorate students, for graduate students potentially, although those overlap with the previous category, and also recognizing the university's role in contributing to affordable housing in the municipalities that it is within. The three primary areas in which this is likely to happen would be the Butler Tract, here formerly used as graduate housing, but as you know, no longer being used for that purpose. The Alexander Corridor, which many very important conversations happened through, I think, as an outcome of the last campus plan, which was the mixed-use corridor aspiration for both housing and commercial activity along Alexander. And then, generally speaking, the possibility of residential uses on the West Windsor lands, but as part of a bigger idea of a future campus community, which I will come back to on the next slide. So as Bob and Ron have both mentioned, we're looking very carefully at the role of all of the lands within the study area, recognizing that it may not be a decade, it may not be 2 decades, it may be shorter than that before something happens in West Windsor, but whatever the time period, there are really important connections. And of course, the university already has athletic uses and some support uses in the West Windsor lands, so there already is activity there, which we need to understand what role it plays in the bigger picture of the university. And I think that so far there are 2 primary considerations. One is that it should be considered a campus community in the same way as the lands in the town of Princeton are a campus community. It may have less, it likely will in the near term have less academic influence, maybe more of the other kinds of uses that are listed here, but it should be thought of as something which is mixed in nature and based on a very strong set of environmental parameters and green spaces. So like the way that these elements of the Lake Carnegie landscape very broadly, the way we as planners think about it, contribute to the sense of place and the quality of environment on the campus north of the lake, we would imagine in the future an expanded system beyond the protected areas that are shown in green today, but that would create the framework that might guide future development. So again, one of the comprehensive set of exercises our team is underway with. Regarding the Springdale Golf Course, it's the university's clear position that nothing will change on the Springdale Golf Course during the duration of the lease, which I believe runs for a little more than 10 more years. But as prudent planners, particularly thinking in that 30-year time frame and in some cases a bit beyond that, it's important to recognize that the Springdale lands play a role in the university's potentially, in that role in the university's future, primarily because of the elements listed in the last bullet here, which is its significant proximity to the central campus, the significant investment that's been made in the Lewis Center for the Arts, the existence of Forbes College and the Graduate College in this location, and Princeton's general orientation as a campus which connects most easily east to west. I mean, as I said at the outset, we'll be working very hard to find those connections north to south, but there is a natural kind of feeling of connection east to west. Should those lands change from their current use, there are 2 very important imperatives which are indicated on the other bullets on this slide. The first would be to come back, as I mentioned at the outset, and understand the opportunity to substantially enhance the environmental condition and performance of the Springdale Creek, and to think about the lands on Springdale really as a public place in the same way. One of the very positive things that Maureen and I learned at the outset in our conversations is how welcome the community at large feels on the Princeton campus and how essentially this is a park for the community, when, in particular when the university population is less active. And I will tell you that's not common in many campuses, and so I think that's a very important thing to be able to continue, and it is a vision that our team would like to understand how it could be continued on Springdale, again, should that ever change in the future. And this final point is this green buffer on the edge, recognizing that as in all of the other places where the university has direct relationships with its neighbors, that sensitivity of those relationships would be paramount. This last slide, which has a lot on it, I will try to unpack a little bit, is really speaking. If I were to cut to the chase, it would be to say that the key objective here is to reduce the dominant role that the private automobile has on the Princeton campus today. Through our work, we've had the opportunity to do a lot of research on Princeton's peer institutions in a whole variety of ways, but most telling for this slide is the provision of parking on campus. Princeton likes to be number one on many lists, but was not very pleased to find itself at number one on the list of all of the Ivies and many of the other comparable schools in the amount of parking that is provided on the campus for free. So really, the goal is to come much more in line with its peers, to significantly reduce the amount of parking provided on campus, but only by significantly reducing the number of people who want to come to campus by car. So there are a whole variety of carrots and sticks, that very elegant term that planners like to use, but incentives to provide people with more reason to not feel the automatic first choice is to come to campus in their car, but also to provide them with very real and viable alternatives for coming in their cars. And so that has three basic characteristics. One is to make campus an even better pedestrian-oriented environment than it is today. The second is to make it a very viable cycling environment, and already I hope that members of the town will see that we have been working to make sure that we connect to and respect the efforts that are underway here to create a bicycle network and a shared bike program in the town, so that's a very important shared objective. And then also transit. There are important conversations that we hope can be had with the ability to provide ways for both the university and the community and New Jersey transit efforts to provide, move everybody towards the same goal of having this be a less car-dominated place. There's just a few important things I wanted to say about this slide. The first is that the routes that you see on Springdale and in the West Windsor lands, and as well as some new routes like this one up this campus side, up the east side of Washington, are very early thinking. At the moment, they are thought of only as potential pedestrian and bicycling routes. Some of them, but definitely not all of them, could have the future in our team's work, could be thinking or could be thought of also as streets for vehicles and transit, but that's work that's still underway. The other thing that I think you probably will notice, and as I alluded to earlier, we're looking at the possibility of two potential pedestrian and bicycle crossings of Lake Carnegie, one in this location and the other in the longer term in this location. This one is likely longer term really just because of the presence of the solar field in this location, which we expect will probably stay for some period of time. But one of the key objectives that we heard from the DNR Canal Commission, and I may have mentioned this, I apologize, I've given this presentation earlier today, so I can't remember if I said this to this group, but there is a strong desire on the behalf of the Canal Commission to continue to provide easy access from a whole variety of points of entry to the canal, which is a park as well. So not to say that they have endorsed this plan at all. Again, this is early thinking, and that we need to continue to have conversations about the right locations for these kinds of connections, but just to say that it is a shared interest of the university and the broader context. And it is actually a very important lesson that we learned through that Campus Compass tool that I mentioned, that the canal towpaths are one of the most cherished amenities of the Princeton University community. Some people thought of it as on campus, some people thought of it as off campus, but a very important piece of their experience. The last point here is a recognition that Route 1 in this location is a very challenged environment. There have been many, many thoughts over decades, and again, a great benefit of having a team that has that history through BFJ and others on our team. I'm not suggesting that we'll come up with solutions, but we are actively looking at possibilities. So, and that, of course, will be a set of conversations. It is in no way a presumption that we would be able to solve this on our own, but the university being a major landholder, both on this side of Route 1 as well as the front 80 or so acres of the Sarnoff property, certainly has something that it may be able to contribute. And then my final slide is really just to tell you where we go from here. You may have noticed that this phase that we're in, phase 3, is expected to end about the end of this year. We're going to continue to work with our steering committee, exploring the specific opportunities and variations for locating those key projects that come out of the strategic planning framework that I shared. We're also looking at the bigger campus systems. There are many: land use, landscape, circulation or movement or transportation, all of the forms of infrastructure, sustainability, many, many more. looking at the way that our thinking will align with other objectives. We need to come back and meet with municipalities, with the state entities. Those conversations that happened more than 2 years ago need to be refreshed now that our team has the ability to contribute something to the conversation. And then looking at the kind of conclusion of this study, we hope by about next summer, so the summer of 2017. And with that, I'll just leave you with the link to the campus plan blog that I mentioned, and we'd be happy to answer questions that you may have.
My next person to speak today is going to be Lisa.